Do you ever feel like you're playing great in practice, but when it comes to a real match, something's just missing? You're hitting all the right shots, but you're still not winning as much as you'd like. If that sounds like you, don't worry, you're not alone. It's most likely not about your talent or technique, it's about your strategy. So in this video, I'm going to break down 4 key tactical rules that will completely change your game. The first key rule to winning more points in tennis is mastering the cross-court shot. It's simple but so effective, but I can't tell you how many players overlook it and don't understand the importance of developing a high quality cross-court shot. But you might be wondering, why is cross-court such a good tactical decision to make? So let's break it down. When you hit cross-court, you're covering a longer distance, and that makes the shot less risky. The court is bigger diagonally than it is straight down the line. So when you aim cross-court, you give yourself more margin for error. But that's not the only thing. The height of the net when you hit cross-court is lower than when you hit down the line. This is because you're hitting over the middle part of the net, which is always a little bit lower than going over the higher parts of the net, which is what you'd be doing if you were hitting the ball down the line. This is another reason why hitting cross-court increases your margin for error. But that's not all. Specifically, hitting deep cross-court shots forces your opponent back behind the baseline, making it harder for them to attack. When you hit deep cross-court, you pull them back behind the baseline and they are left with less time to recover. And inevitably, this buys you time to recover and take advantage of this moment and to take time away from your opponent by hitting that ball into the space. But hitting an effective deep cross-court shot is not the only important thing. Many recreational players don't know where you should recover to after you've hit that cross-court ball. And you might hear many coaches at your club tell you to always recover back to the middle of the court. But in general, we hardly ever want to be recovering back into exactly the middle of the court. And this is because the bisector of angles. So when we hit cross-court, we're increasing the likelihood that our opponent is going to hit back cross-court to us. So this means that we should position ourselves slightly off-center. This ensures that I'm covering the bisector of angles as effectively as I can, because there's obviously still a chance that my opponent will go down the line and I have recovered enough so that I will be able to retrieve that down the line shot, but it's more likely that my opponent is going to hit that ball back to me cross-court. And so I have already given myself more of a chance, an opportunity to get to that ball quicker and take that opportunity to hit the shot more effectively. So the second rule to winning more points in tennis is using depth to control the rally. And if you can consistently push your opponent back behind the baseline, this shows that you're in a great position to dictate most of the points that you're playing. So if you can consistently hit your shots somewhere around halfway between the service line and baseline or deeper, then this shows that you're in a really good position to put your opponent under so much pressure, push them back behind the baseline to ensure that they cannot attack off the shots, and this will put you in a better position to dictate the rally and play the points on your terms. By hitting deep shots, you're limiting your opponent's options. When they're pushed behind the baseline, they can't attack as easily, and it forces them to either rally defensively back or to make an error. But here's the thing, guys, you don't want to always hit that ball deep. You've got to make sure that you're mixing in other types of shots. So mixing in shorter balls just inside the service box, for example, drop shots or little angle shots when your opponent is expecting another deep shot is a good idea. The idea is to keep your opponent guessing throughout the match. If they're constantly running back to retrieve your deep shots, they'll most likely be out of position when you drop that ball in short. Tip number 3 is to use the down the line shot strategically. It's very common for recreational players to randomly hit down the line shots when they're not in a good position to do so. For example, when you're in a defensive situation and you're pushed back behind the baseline, hitting a ball down the line in that scenario increases your risk of hitting that ball a little bit shorter because you're out of position and defending, and so therefore this gives your opponent a massive target to hit into on your backhand side. And I know what you're thinking, guys. Isn't the down the line shot a risky shot? Well, yes, it can be, but when it's used at the right moment, it can be incredibly effective. So let me show you why. So when you're in a trading situation with your opponent going cross court to cross court, and you're establishing control in this cross court rally, the down the line shot is your best way to change direction and catch your opponent off guard. When you've hit a really effective cross court, so you've hit a little bit more of a wider cross court shot to push them wide off of the court, or if you've made a little bit more of a deeper cross court shot to push them back behind the baseline, then this is a good time to use that down the line shot to get them out of position, to put them under pressure, and to get them to either hit a forced error or a weaker ball back to you, which you can attack off from. The key is to not fall into the trap of hitting this shot too early when you're rallying cross court with your opponent, or hitting it too much. So you want to make sure that you wait until you've forced your opponent wide, then you can use that down the line shot to really change up the rhythm and the tempo and to put yourself in a position to win the point. And tip number 4, the last tip, is potentially the most crucial rule of tennis tactics, and that is to read your opponent's weakness. So most tennis players, if not all tennis players, will have at least one weakness. And it's your job to find it and exploit the weakness. Sometimes it's extremely obvious, but the key thing is when you're in your match warm-up, for example, or in the first few games of the match, you want to look for signs that show where they're vulnerable. And once you identify a weakness, or 2 weaknesses or 3 weaknesses, for example, you've got to keep hammering it. You'll notice that they will start to make more and more errors on that side, more unforced errors, and you'll be able to gain control of the match more so. It's very common for recreational players to just kind of go through the match and only think about themselves and think about how they're playing the match. But what you want to do is shift that attention away from your game and have a look at their game for the first few games of the match to try and work out where their weaknesses lie, what they like, what they don't like. And from there, you can then create yourself a strategy for the rest of the match to follow. And obviously, guys, it's important to not just stick to one strategy throughout the whole match if things start to go wrong for you, or if you find your opponent has kind of gained some rhythm in that shot that you think was their weakness. So it's important that you stay adaptable throughout every tennis match you play to be able to change your strategy, to be able to change up the types of shots you're hitting and the type of shots that you're giving to your opponent. So let's recap. If you want to level up your tennis, you need to master these 4 critical and key tactical rules. The cross-court shot, using depth to control the rally, hitting that down the line shot at the right moment, and reading your opponent's weaknesses. These 4 strategies will make a huge difference to your matches. So guys, make sure you practice these 4 rules next time you step out onto the court, and I am sure that you'll be playing a lot more smarter and a more tactical game.